Good evening. If you've been following the news about Jeffrey Epstein over the past few years, what happened this week in England is something many people thought would never happen. On Thursday morning, February 19th, British police arrested Prince Andrew. Well, he's not actually called Prince anymore. His brother King Charles took away that title last year. His legal name now is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But for most of his life, he was known as Prince Andrew, the Queen's second son, a member of one of the most powerful families in the world. Let me be very clear about what happened, because this is important. British police arrested him on his 66th birthday and held him for questioning for 11 hours before releasing him. He has not been charged with a crime yet, but he is what police call under investigation. That means the police are still gathering evidence and deciding whether to formally charge him. Now you might be wondering, arrested for what exactly? The charge is called misconduct in public office. Let me explain what that means in plain English. When Andrew was younger, before all the Epstein scandal came out, he had an official job working for the British government. His title was Special Representative for International Trade and Investment. Basically, he traveled around the world representing Britain to help British companies do business in other countries. It was an important government position. According to the police investigation, Andrew allegedly sent confidential government documents, secret reports that were supposed to stay within the government, to Jeffrey Epstein. These weren't just any documents. They were official reports about Andrew's trips to places like Hong Kong, Vietnam, and Singapore. They contained information about investment opportunities and trade secrets that the British government did not want shared with private citizens, especially not with someone like Jeffrey Epstein. Now, why would anyone share secret government information with Jeffrey Epstein? That's the question police are trying to answer. And that's why this arrest matters so much, not just in Britain, but here in the United States as well. Let me take a step back and remind everyone who Jeffrey Epstein was, because if you're just catching up on this story, it can be confusing. Jeffrey Epstein was a wealthy American financier, a man who made a lot of money managing investments for very rich people, but he was also a criminal. In 2008, he pleaded guilty to charges related to paying for sex with an underage girl. He served about 13 months in jail, which many people thought was far too short a sentence for such serious crimes. But Epstein's crimes went far beyond that one case. For decades, he ran what prosecutors called a sex trafficking ring. That means he recruited young girls, some as young as 14 years old, and forced or manipulated them into performing sexual acts for him and for his powerful friends. He did this in multiple locations: his mansion in New York, his ranch in New Mexico, his private island in the Caribbean, and his home in Palm Beach, Florida. In 2019, Epstein was arrested again on federal sex trafficking charges. This time, prosecutors said they had evidence of a much larger criminal operation involving dozens, possibly hundreds, of victims. But before Epstein could go to trial, he died in his jail cell. Officials said it was suicide, though many people have questioned that conclusion. After Epstein died, the big question became, what about all the powerful people who were part of his network? Epstein kept detailed records, thousands of emails, flight logs showing who flew on his private plane, photographs, and even videos. Many of these documents have now been released by the U.S. Department of Justice. They're called the Epstein Files, and they mention hundreds of names: politicians, businessmen, celebrities, and yes, members of royal families. Prince Andrew's name appears many times in these files. One woman named Virginia Giuffre accused Andrew of having sex with her 3 times when she was just 17 years old. She said Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell, who is now in prison, forced her to do this. Andrew has always denied these accusations. He said he never met Virginia Giuffre, and at one point he even said he couldn't have been with her on a specific night because he was at a pizza restaurant with his daughter. But photographs exist showing Andrew with his arm around Virginia Giuffre when she was a teenager, with Ghislaine Maxwell standing right next to them. The photo was taken at Maxwell's house in London. In 2022, Andrew paid Virginia Giuffre a settlement, reportedly around $16 million, to end her lawsuit against him. Importantly, the settlement said Andrew did not admit to doing anything wrong. but paying that much money raised obvious questions. If he was innocent, why pay? Tragically, Virginia Giuffre died by suicide last year. She was only 41 years old. Her family released a statement this week after Andrew's arrest saying, "At last today our broken hearts have been lifted at the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. On behalf of our sister Virginia, we extend our gratitude to the UK's Thames Valley Police for their investigation and the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He was never a prince. For survivors everywhere, Virginia did this for you." That statement is powerful. It shows that Virginia's family believes she told the truth and that her fight, even though she's no longer here, is helping other victims get justice. Now let's talk about why Andrew's arrest matters beyond just one man facing consequences. A former federal prosecutor named Glenn Kirshner explained this very clearly this week, and I want to share his thinking with you because it helps us understand what might happen next. Glenn Kirshner spent decades as a prosecutor in Washington, D.C. He's prosecuted murderers, drug dealers, and all sorts of serious criminals. And he said something very important. When police arrest someone who was part of a criminal network, especially someone who is wealthy and powerful and facing serious prison time, that person often becomes what's called a cooperating witness. What does that mean? It means they start talking. They start telling investigators about other people who were involved in the crimes. Why would they do this? Usually, cooperating witnesses hope to get a reduced sentence, a shorter time in prison in exchange for their information. But Glenn Kirshner pointed out something interesting about Prince Andrew's situation. Andrew is not just any criminal. He's a man who spent his entire life at the very top of British society. He grew up in palaces. He rubbed elbows with presidents, prime ministers, billionaires, and celebrities. He believed, and I think this is fair to say, that the rules didn't really apply to him. He thought he was above the law. Now suddenly police have arrested him. They took him to a police station on his birthday and questioned him for 11 hours. That's humiliating. That's shocking. And according to Glenn Kirshner, when people like Andrew experience that kind of fall from grace, they often get angry. They think, why am I being arrested when all these other powerful people who did the same things or worse are still walking free? And when they get angry, they start talking. Think about it this way. Andrew knows things. He was in Epstein's circle for years. He flew on Epstein's private plane. He stayed at Epstein's properties. He attended Epstein's parties. He knows who else was there. He knows what he saw. And if he's facing the possibility of prison, misconduct in public office can carry a life sentence in the United Kingdom, he might decide to share that information. Now, we have to be careful here. Andrew has not said he will cooperate. He may choose to say nothing at all, which is his legal right, but the possibility exists, and that possibility is making a lot of powerful people very nervous right now, both in Britain and in the United States. Let me explain how this could affect investigations here in America, because this is where the story gets really important for those of us watching from the United States. Right now, the U.S. Department of Justice is led by Attorney General Pam Bondi. She was appointed by President Donald Trump. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Pam Bondi has shown no interest in investigating anyone mentioned in the Epstein files. Zero. Despite thousands of pages of documents, despite hundreds of names, despite clear evidence that many powerful people were part of Epstein's network, the Department of Justice has essentially said, we're not pursuing this. Compare that to what's happening in other countries. France has opened criminal investigations. The United Kingdom just arrested Prince Andrew. Turkey, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland have all launched investigations into people in their countries who are mentioned in the Epstein files. These are what we would call civilized countries with legitimate law enforcement. They're doing what you would expect. When there's evidence of crimes, they investigate, but not the United States. Why? Well, President Trump's name appears in the Epstein files more than 38,000 times, according to a New York Times analysis. That doesn't mean he committed crimes. Many of those mentions are from newsletters or news articles that Epstein saved. But there are documents with serious allegations. There are FBI reports from witnesses who came forward. There are questions that have never been answered. And Pam Bondi works for Donald Trump. She's not going to investigate her boss. That's just the reality. So what can be done? This is where things get interesting, and where Andrew's arrest in Britain might actually matter for justice in America. Glenn Kirshner, the former prosecutor, explained that there are workarounds. Just because the federal government won't investigate doesn't mean no one can investigate. Individual states have their own prosecutors who can bring charges for crimes that happened in their states. For example, Epstein had a mansion in New York City. Crimes allegedly happened there. The Manhattan District Attorney, a man named Alvin Bragg, has the power to open a criminal investigation and bring charges under New York state law. He doesn't need permission from Pam Bondi or the Federal Department of Justice. He can do it on his own. The same is true in New Mexico, where Epstein owned a ranch. State prosecutors there could investigate. Same with Florida, where Epstein had a home in Palm Beach. Though finding prosecutors willing to pursue the case there might be more difficult because Florida is currently run by Republicans loyal to Trump. Now here's where the international cooperation comes in. Normally, when there's a crime that involves people in multiple countries, law enforcement agencies work together. The FBI might coordinate with British police, for example. They share information. They help each other. But what if the FBI won't cooperate because Pam Bondi has told them not to investigate Epstein cases? What if British police call their contacts at the FBI and the FBI basically says, "We're not interested"? Well, British police could do something unusual. They could reach out directly to state prosecutors. They could call Alvin Bragg in New York or the Attorney General in New Mexico and say, "We have information from our investigation that might help yours." Is that normal? No. Usually international cooperation goes through federal channels. But these are not normal times. When the federal government is actively refusing to do its job, when the Attorney General is protecting the president instead of pursuing justice, sometimes you have to find creative solutions. And here's the beautiful thing. If state prosecutors start building cases now, they can hand those cases over to a future federal Department of Justice when there's a new president who actually cares about the rule of law. Criminal investigations can be shared between state and federal authorities. They can work together. A state prosecutor can do all the hard work, gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, building a strong case, and then bring in federal prosecutors later when the political situation changes. The crimes that Epstein and his associates allegedly committed often violate both state and federal law. Sex trafficking across state lines, for example, is a federal crime. But sexual assault of a minor in New York is a state crime. Prosecutors can charge someone with both. Sometimes they choose one or the other, sometimes both. Glenn Kirshner made an important point about this. The federal government has more resources, more money, more investigators, bigger budgets. So usually when a crime could be prosecuted either way, it makes sense for the feds to take it because they have the best chance of winning. But the states shouldn't be underestimated. State prosecutors handle 95 to 97% of all criminal cases in America. They're the ones in court every day. They're often more experienced than federal prosecutors because they handle so many more cases. So while the feds might have the biggest hammer in terms of resources, state prosecutors are often the most skilled lawyers in the room. And there's another reason why pursuing these cases at both the state and federal level matters: deterrence. When people see that rich and powerful individuals are being hammered, not just charged, but seriously punished, it sends a message. It tells future criminals, you are not above the law. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how many famous friends you have, or what your job title is. If you commit these crimes, you will face consequences. Right now, that message is not being sent. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison, and that's it. No one else. After decades of abuse involving over 1,000 victims, only 2 people have faced any consequences. That's not justice, that's a cover-up. Now let's talk about what all of this means going forward, because I know many of you watching are wondering, will anyone else actually be held accountable? The honest answer is, we don't know yet. but there are some hopeful signs. First, countries around the world are investigating. Prince Andrew's arrest proves that. It shows that at least some law enforcement agencies are serious about this. They're not letting the scandal fade away. Second, there's public pressure. Polls show that a majority of Americans, 53%, say the Epstein files have lowered their trust in political and business leaders. And 69% agree with the statement that the files show that powerful people in the U.S. are rarely held accountable for their actions. People are paying attention. People are angry. And in a democracy, that matters. Third, there's bipartisan frustration in Congress. You have Democrats calling for investigations, obviously. But you also have some Republicans, people like Thomas Massie from Kentucky, who's a very conservative congressman, saying the same thing. Massie gave a speech on the House floor where he said, "How will we know if this bill has been successful? We will know when there are men, rich men, in handcuffs being perp-walked to the jail. And until then, this is still a cover-up." When you have people on both sides of the political divide agreeing that this is wrong, that creates pressure that's harder for politicians to ignore. But I won't sugarcoat it. The obstacles are real. As long as Donald Trump is president and Pam Bondi is attorney general, the federal government will not pursue these cases. That's just the reality. They have too much to lose politically if the investigations point toward Trump or his associates. So, what can ordinary citizens do? What can you do if you're someone who cares about justice for these victims? First, pay attention. Don't let this story fade from your mind just because the news cycle moves on to other things. Keep asking questions. Keep demanding answers. Second, support journalists and independent media organizations that are doing the hard work of investigating these files and holding powerful people accountable. These investigations take time and money. They need public support. Third, contact your elected representatives, your congressmen, your senators, your state attorney general, and tell them you want investigations. Tell them this matters to you. Politicians respond to pressure from constituents. Fourth, vote. In future elections, ask candidates, will you support full investigations into the Epstein network? Will you push for transparency? Will you hold powerful people accountable regardless of their political party? Make this an issue that affects your vote. Let me close with this thought. Prince Andrew's arrest this week is historic. It's the first time a senior member of the British royal family has been arrested on criminal charges in modern history. Think about that. This is someone who was born into incredible privilege, who spent his whole life protected by wealth and status and family connections. And yet, when the evidence became overwhelming, when public pressure became too great, the police did their job. They arrested him. They questioned him. They're building a case. That sends a powerful message. No one is above the law, not princes, not presidents, not billionaires, no one. The question is whether America will follow Britain's example. Will American prosecutors, whether state or federal, have the courage to pursue justice wherever the evidence leads? Will they be willing to investigate powerful people, knowing it will cost them politically, knowing they'll face pressure and criticism and threats? We're going to find out. And what happens next will tell us a lot about what kind of country we are. Are we a nation of laws where justice applies equally to everyone? Or are we a nation where the rules only apply to ordinary people while the rich and powerful get to do whatever they want? Virginia Giuffre believed in the first option. She fought for years to tell her truth, even when powerful people called her a liar, even when they used their lawyers and their money and their influence to try to silence her. She never gave up. And now, even though she's gone, her fight continues. For her, for the 1,000+ other victims, for everyone who has ever been told they don't matter because they're not rich or famous or powerful, we need to demand better. We need to demand justice. Prince Andrew's arrest is one step. It's an important step. But it's only one step on a very long road. The journey toward full accountability for everyone involved in Epstein's crimes continues. Stay informed, stay engaged, and don't let them sweep this under the rug. Thank you for watching.